Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, at the earnings conference for analysts and investors of Tauron Group for 2017. I'd like to welcome both persons present in this room as well as those following our video conference over the web. The host of today's meetings will be Mr. Filip Grzegorczyk, the President of the Management Board of Tauron Polska Energia, CEO, and Marek Wadowski, Vice President for Finance, CFO. Our presidents will present the key highlights and earnings of last year, and we'll come on then. My name is Marcin Lauer. I represent the Investor Relations team. As usual, the presentation will be conducted in Polish, and it's being simultaneously interpreted into English. Outside of this broadcast, you can listen to it via a video conference call. Please, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. With pleasure, we would like to present today to you the earnings for 2017. Better, definitely better versus 2016, and in accordance with up to now practice, I will discuss the general overall financial position of Tauron. I will present the highlights, key events that took place. I will show you the performance implementation of the CapEx program and the effects, the implementation of the efficiency initiatives, and following that, the CFO, Mr. Wadowski, will describe the financial results by segments and the outlook for 2018. And, ladies and gentlemen, with respect to the earnings of 2017, the earnings are good and in accordance with expectations of the market. With respect to the reported EBITDA for 2017, we improved it. It reached more than 3.5 billion PLN. This is 6% up year-on-year. It is worth noting that during that period, 1.5% up, the EBITDA margin went up 1.5%. The biggest contribution to EBITDA came from the distribution, supply, and generation segments. Net profit reached 1.381 billion PLN, and it was almost 4 times higher than last year. In 2017, the CapEx of Tauron reached around 3.5 billion PLN, out of which 1.3 billion was spent on the construction of a 910 megawatt unit at the Jaworzno Free Power Plant. I'd like to emphasize that Tauron maintains a stable net debt to EBITDA ratio, which at the end of December last year reached 2.3, which means that it's at this level the same as at the end of 2016. We are effective as far as acquiring optimal sources of financing, as a result of which we are successively diversifying the structure of the debt, of the financing, and by extending the maturity date of our debt. And this way we are ensuring that the group is expanding in a stable manner. The details on the financing and debt will be presented by Mr. Wadowski, the CFO. Moving on to the operating data. In the mining segment, the production of coal reached 6.5 million tons of coal, which means maintaining the same level as in 2016, so flat. Whereas the sales of electricity of coal went up 12% due to the sale of inventory that was accumulated. During the period under review, our mining plants satisfied 57% of the group's demand for coal, the coal required to generate electricity and heat. In 2017, the generation segment produced 10% more electricity than a year before. Higher production of electricity is a consequence of successfully implemented product and sales strategy. A 6% increase of heat generation was caused by the higher demand of consumers due to low temperatures outdoor. It is also noteworthy that there is a positive trend being continued in the distribution and supply segment, and in these segments we posted a 3% and 9% increase respectively of the volume of distributed electricity and the supply volume. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like now to draw your attention to the earnings net profit, which was positively affected by the positive FX differences on the debt, euro-denominated debt. In case of the operating data, we are dealing with a solid increase in all lines of business except for the mining business. Details on the earnings and the outlook of this segment will be presented in the subsequent part of this presentation. On the next slide, we are presenting the most important achievements of Tauron 2017. I'd like to draw your attention, first of all, to three key elements from the point of view of our future situation. First of all, in Q1 2017, we conducted successful, effective actions trying to save the construction unit of the CCGT unit in Stalowa Wola. In March 2017, after repayment of liabilities towards the institutions financing the project, the amendments to the gas and electricity agreements came into force, and the restructuring agreement for the project came into force. In October, the contract manager was selected, who is responsible for the comprehensive coordination and supervision over the works conducted under this project. Last week, the special purpose vehicle combined heat plant Stalowa Wola gained new financing from the BGK Bank that will enable completing of this project. The second important highlight of last year, an event that took place in 2017, was the signing of the agreement with the Polish Development Fund on cooperation with respect to implementing the 910 megawatt unit construction at Jaworzno 3 power plant. Since then, very intense work was conducted on developing all details, working out all details of our cooperation. In the near future, you can expect the signing of the documentation related to Polish Development Fund joining the Jaworzno project. The assumed value of the fund's involvement in the Nowa Jaworzno Grupa Tauron subsidiary is 880 million PLN, which of course would have a positive effect on the impact on the group's balance sheet. The third important highlight that we were dealing last year was the financing of Tauron Group's operations. In this respect, definitely what's worth mentioning is three, if successfully completed initiatives, the result of which is the strengthening and the diversifying of the sources of financing of the group. The first of these initiatives is the Eurobond issue worth 500 million euro. With a maturity date of 10 years. These securities are BBB rating granted by Fitch Ratings agency, and they are being listed on the London Stock Exchange. The second important initiative is the conclusion of the agreement with the BGK Bank. According to this agreement, we are able to issue 12-year hybrid bonds worth 400 million PLN. Up to now, we have not conducted an issue of these bonds, which means that we are treating this program as an optional source of financing. The third initiative that's noteworthy is an extension by 2 years of the period of availability of funds available under the bond issue program, coming from 2020 to 2022, the extension took place. As part of this program, we also gained higher funds available over a longer period of time of financing. Our actions aimed at ensuring the financial security and safety of Tauron Group are being reflected in the rating of BBB with a stable outlook for our rating. The rating was granted by Fitch Rating Agency. Let me hand over to Mr. President Wadowski, the CFO. In 2017, the macroeconomic situation was beneficial, was favorable for Tauron Capital Group. good level of GDP growth rate, good level of manufacturing production sold, that led to an increase of electricity consumption by more than 2%, and also an increase of production of electricity in Poland by 2%. With respect to electricity prices, 2017 was a challenge for utility groups due to the fact that an average price acquired by Tauron Capital Group was lower than 2016. A positive development was, however, a reduction of the price of green property rights comparing 2017 versus 2016. Analyzing the EBITDA result in 2017-2016, we took into account three one-off events, namely the solving of a provision related to the CHP Stalowa Wola of more than 200 million PLN, setting up a provision for the one-off bonuses due to the agreement signed with the workforce, social party, and the dissolving of the actuarial provision in the distribution segment. Taking into account those three one-off events, the EBITDA result of 2017 was almost 9% higher versus 2016. In Q4 alone, looking at EBITDA result, we took into account two one-off events, namely the one-off bonus due to the signed agreement with the social party in a lower amount, because this was applicable only to Q4 in the amount of 55 million PLN, and the dissolving of the actuarial provision in the distribution segment for the amount of 162 million PLN. And taking into account these two one-off events, the EBITDA result of Q4 is 2% up. All our segments in 2017 reached positive EBITDA and EBIT results, except for the mining segment. Our most important segment, generating the highest contribution to EBITDA, continues to be invariably the distribution segment, due to a much higher EBITDA in the supply segment year over year. The contribution of distribution segment went down a little bit to complete to the full EBITDA, but this is in no way related to any deterioration in the situation in the distribution segment. Comparing quarter-over-quarter results, the structure of the EBITDA result is very comparable, very similar. The most important continues to be the distribution segment. The main factors that contributed to the change of the EBITDA result in 2017 is, first of all, the increase of EBITDA result in the supply segment. About the reasons, I will elaborate on the reasons further on in the presentation. Looking quarter over quarter, comparing it, the main reasons is the EBITDA change in the distribution segment and in the mining segment. Moving on now to the earnings of the individual segments. In the mining segment in 2017, almost 12% we increased sales versus a comparable result of extraction output. However, due to a significant increase of the costs, especially the costs of machinery, devices, mining devices, as well as mining services, the EBITDA was practically unchanged, was flat as in 2016. It is worth noting in this segment the fact that in Q4 we were dealing with unfavorable geological mining developments, which, as a matter of fact, led to a decrease of EBITDA when you compare these two periods. In the generation segment in 2017, we were dealing, as I mentioned before, with lower electricity prices, which resulted, on the other hand, in a lower margin. Additionally, in 2017, we were conducting a different trading strategy versus 2016. This difference was based on the fact that in 2017 we were selling more volume of electricity contracted than in 2016, a higher volume. This was reflected in lower revenue from the operational capacity reserve, and at the same time, for us, it was a positive development due to the fact that had we not carried out this strategy, then the generation segments would simply have been lower. A positive development in the generation segment in 2017 is an improvement of EBITDA due to lower costs of emission allowances. These lower emission allowances costs were related, first of all, due to the fact of transferring the free allocation of 1.7 million tons from 2016 to 2017, shifting of it. The total value is 42 million PLN of the shifted emission allowances. At the same time, we are dealing with a higher emission of CO2 due to the higher electricity generation, and we may say that these two elements offset each other. Additionally, in 2016, we hedged, due to the larger contracting in 2017, we hedged the prices of CO2, and this had a positive impact, total impact of more than 50 million PLN on EBITDA in this segment. In Q4 alone, the development that had an impact upon the EBITDA result, basically you can mention the same developments: lower electricity price, lower electricity margin, positive impact of lower CO2 costs, and at the same time in Q4 alone, with respect to the other elements, we are dealing mainly with one-off events in the form of provisions. In the distribution segment, when we compare the earnings, the result of 2017 versus 2016, it is worth noting that a material impact on this comparison comes from the dissolving of the actuarial provision. 2016, 162 million PLN. When we adjust EBITDA based on this value, this amount, as a matter of fact, the most important element would be an increase of the distributed electricity volume by 3%. This led to a higher EBITDA. As I mentioned before, adjusted higher EBITDA, because without this adjustment, EBITDA is slightly lower. In Q4 alone, the situation is very similar. The adjustments, after adjustments based on one of events such as the dissolving of the actuarial provision, as well as the smaller adjustment in 2017. In 2017, in Q4, we set up certain provisions of a lower value, provisions related to the real estate tax, related to the treatment by some municipalities of forest land as land used for business operations. And if we adjust this result, the earnings taking into account these two elements, then the EBITDA result in the distribution segment would have been higher. The key parameters impacting the earnings of the distribution segment is, first of all, the regulated asset base, which over the last few years showed an upward trend, and the SAIDI and SAIFI indicators, factors, as we mentioned before. SAIDI and SAIFI factors were a challenge for us in 2017. After the final settlement, we can see that we were not able to meet those coefficients that we were supposed to meet. It was the consequence, as you know, probably of highly unfavorable events, violent, first of all, weather-related developments. All the time we are constructing dialogue with the President of the Energy Regulatory Office, how we could, in case of such events, what our approach should be. Anyhow, as of today, the situation is, according to the methodology for calculating, we did not meet the goal that might lead to a potentially could be reflected in the 2019 tariff. In the supply segment, two favorable developments that led to a significant increase of EBITDA result. First of all, the dissolving of a provision for the CHP Stella Wola in the amount of more than 200 million PLN, a beneficial situation with respect to the property rights. In 2016, the average price of property rights was more than 120 PLN per megawatt hour. In 2017, it was slightly more than 60 PLN. That's a significant decline of costs of property rights, which led to a significant improvement of the earnings of this segment. In Q4 alone, very similar elements, nevertheless, taking into account the fact that in the other operations item, we are showing the provisions set up that we did not set up in 2017. So we can say that 2016, this result should have been a bit higher, but what we are showing under the other item. With respect to the financing, the situation in 2017 was stable, or one may say it was even good, because we acquired new sources of financing. We issued Eurobonds that are now being listed on the London Stock Exchange. The amount of the financing available at the end of 2017 is 5 billion 370 million, 2.27 net debt to EBITDA ratio, showing a slight decline versus last year. Last week, we signed an agreements with the bondholders, providing the financing for the Tauron Capital Group as part of a large bond issue program. According to these agreements, the maturity date was extended for the bonds issued under this program up to 2022. This extension is an element of a broader strategy with respect to financing, which is aimed at extending the maturity dates of the debt. We are assuming that the debt that we are to repay in 2019 will be repaid. However, in the subsequent years, we are trying, to the maximum possible degree, trying to extend the maturity dates in order to flatten, to smoothen the repayments of individual bonds over time. With respect to work progress on key projects, CapEx projects, let me hand over to the CEO. Ladies and gentlemen, well, looking at the CapEx program, the work progress on the key projects are in line with the schedules and budgets assumed. As you know very well, the biggest undertaking of Tauron Group is the construction of a 910 megawatt unit at Jaworzno Free Power Plant. At the end of December, the project was 54% advanced, and the plant scheduled completion date for this project is 2019. The next project, which the completion date is scheduled for 2019, is the construction of a CCGT unit at Stalowa Wola. The work progress on this project at the end of Q4 was 86%. The other largest projects listed on the slide are related to the mining line of operation. And as part of them, you need to mention the construction of 800-meter level at Janina coal mine, the Grzegorz shaft construction at the Sobieski coal mine, and the investment program at the Brzeszcze coal mine. Ladies and gentlemen, with respect to CapEx of Tauron Capital Group in 2017, they reached 3.5 billion PLN. Traditionally, the biggest CapEx was spent on upgrading the grid assets and connecting to the distribution grid of new customers. The total CapEx in the distribution segment reached the level of 1.7 billion PLN. A slightly lower CapEx was reported by the generation segment. 85% of the total CapEx in the segment was used for the construction of a coal fired power unit at Jaworzno Free Power Plant. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of a strategy in force, we are implementing the third efficiency improvement program. It assumes achieving the total effects over the time frame 2016-2018 of 1.3 billion PLN from the beginning of 2016 until the end of 2017. Tauron Group generated financial effects in the amount of almost 1.1 billion PLN, which means 84% performance of the plan. The biggest savings were achieved in the distribution and generation segments. As part of a strategy, we are also implementing the optimizing campaigns and pro-efficiency activities called overall strategic initiatives. This group of activities planned for 2017-2020 time frame includes, for instance, reducing the capex, optimizing the assets, and development of new products. As part of the strategic initiatives, we are assuming achieving total effects in the 2017-2020 time frame in the region of 3.4 billion PLN. In 2017, these effects were around 900 million PLN, which is 27% of a total value planned for the whole 3-year time frame. That's what I'd like to finish the discussion of the earnings, the financial results, the most important highlights of 2017. Let me hand over now to the CFO, Mr. Wadowski, who will describe the outlook for 2018, individual segments, and then we'll invite you to ask questions. Thank you very much. As we can see, 2018, excuse me. First of all, the distribution. In this segment, we assume a slight increase due, first of all, to an increase of regulatory asset base up to the 16.9 billion PLN. The impact on the EBITDA of the segment is 36 million PLN. We are also assuming an increase of the EBITDA due to an increase of the weighted average cost of capital up to the level of 6.015%. The total impact of these two factors is more than 100 million PLN. We are also assuming in 2018 an increase of the volume of electricity distributed. Our opinion is that in 2018, the macroeconomic situation in Poland also will continue to be good. In the supply segment, we are assuming a decrease of EBITDA, first of all, due to the fact that in 2018, there will be no one-off events such as the dissolving of a provision in the amount of 200 million PLN. Secondly, due to the fact that there is an increase of electricity prices, there is an increase of price that the supply segment is purchasing on the market, which leads to the margin pressure. In this segment, we are also assuming in 2018 a slight decline of volume of supply to end final consumers, mainly in the segment of large consumers. In the generation segment, due to the increasing coal prices, increasing by more than 1,000%, and an increase of the prices of CO2 emission allowances, as well as practically a shortage of free emission allowances, we are assuming a decline of EBITDA. In the mining segment, we can see certain possibility of increasing EBITDA versus 2017. We are assuming a similar volume of coal production year over year. We are also assuming coal prices increases in the region of around 10%, larger in the thermal coal dust, a smaller increase in the large and medium size lump coal type products. However, we have to remember that in this segment, the cost of mining machinery and mining services, mining devices are increasing due to the increase of steel prices or labor costs. This will have a major impact upon the earnings of this segment. Over time, we are working on improving the productivity in the mining segment. Because of that, we are also incurring higher costs. For instance, performing more preparatory works, which are, in terms of cost per unit, are higher. We are assuming in 2018 the continued implementation of the efficiency improvement program, and all the time we're working on developing better results, achieving better results in the generation segment, and of course taking into account all the time the risk that may materialize later on as the year goes on, but taking into account this risk, we are assuming that the EBITDA could be comparable, or the same or comparable versus last year. But however, it still requires a lot of effort from on our side, because we can see a lot of challenges in the individual segments. With respect to the capex, we are estimating that the level can be above 4 billion PLN capital expenditures. First of all, due to the fact that we'll be continuing the 910 megawatt unit construction at Jaworzno free power plant, and higher capex in the distribution segment. In terms of debt, we are assuming a slight increase of debt level. However, nevertheless, the net debt to EBITDA ratio should not exceed the 3.0. That's all with respect to the outlook, 2018 outlook. Thank you very much, the President, for the presentation. Let's now have a session of questions and answers. Please feel free to ask questions. Next to the Management Board, you also have access to Mr. Dariusz Niemiec, the Managing Director for Trading, and Mr. Roman Makieła, the Executive Director for Controlling. The persons following our presentation remotely may send questions using the form available on the broadcast website, and due to technical reasons, please ask questions to the microphone, but will be provided to you by the lady here. Please. Please. Good afternoon. Kędzierzowski, Citibank. I would like to ask, what is, according to your understanding, the issue of the free allocations of CO2 emission allowances beyond 2020? How they will be allocated, in what quantity, in what form, how much you can get of them? And the second thing I'd like to ask, how will Stalowa Wola operate? Namely, how this plant can enter the market at today's gas price, and you want to pour more money into it. What will be the mode of operation of this unit, of this subsidiary? So that's all from me for now. With respect to the free allocation of CO2 emission allowances beyond 2020, I will not be quoting all the information that's practically commonly available with respect to the climate policy of the European Union. We are assuming, based on our estimates, analyzing individual investment projects, that the investment project must be profitable even if you were not to get any CO2 emission allowances. Therefore, if these free of charge emission allowances would be available to us, that would be an additional bonus. That's our assumption. We can see a big risk that this free allocation of CO2 emission allowances may not be so favorable to us as in the previous period, so the current one actually. Here our view is that looking forward at the individual segments, especially at the generation segment, we are thinking, we're expecting the CO2 prices to go up, and we are expecting, for us, a very important element for us is how the CO2 prices are reflected in the electricity prices. And here, that's what I understand, but my question was more to your knowledge of what will be the conditions and who will define them, that you can get this bonus. The bonus is what I'm interested in, not how CO2 affects the electricity prices, but who will define this bonus? Will be an ordinance, Minister of Energy? Who will decide on that? Because people say that it's supposed to be 700 million tons for the entire sector. That's practically equal to the total capacity of the sector in the various tranches of the Modernization Fund, National Fund, and so on, Solidarity Fund, and so on. And the question is, what does it mean, the auction for the new CO2, and whether anyone in Poland has begun this subject, or do we have it all ahead of us so that we can define that in detail? Well, we're not able to provide such specific information as of now. Simply we don't know that yet. As of the second question, what will be the mode of operation of Stalowa Wola CHP? Of course, a lot depends upon, speaking generally, about the capacity market. Namely, of course, the CHP Stalowa Wola will be ready to enter the capacity market. However, a lot will depend on at what level this additional revenue from the capacity market will be. And we are assuming also, of course, that the Stalowa Wola CHP will be a combined heat and power plant that will be a profitable one. However, a significant element of that will be the capacity market. What load factor are you assuming for this power plant? Let's leave behind the capacity market revenue, because all could be profitable if you get money, extra money. But what I'm more interested in is what percentage of time it will be operating. Well, let me ask now the Director Niemiec to answer this question, please. As it was already mentioned, the Stalowa Wola CHP is a combined heat and power plant, so the minimum time of operation of this unit will depend upon the demand for heat. As of now, this heat one may say, is all year round. Of course, with an increase of demand in the winter and fall periods. And this, from the point of view of a business model for the future, is the basis. So it seems that this unit will have the so-called system support due to the firm demand from the heat sector. So part of electricity could be accounted for with TSO, which will not be reflected in the market. But however, all the hours where the price spreads will be at the right level will be contracted on the market. Several versions and scenarios we are expecting for this unit, but generally speaking, one may say that this business model for this CHP, this is what we expect. Thank you very much. And I have another difficult question. It seems to me that it's difficult. If you gentlemen could look beyond the introduction of the capacity market, to what extent your requirements for coal be looking well into 2025? Annual consumption of coal, and in this context, that makes sense, in your sense, to go with new investment projects in 3 coal mines in the business that didn't earn cash flow, single PLN over the last 10 years. And I think I showed to you that EBITDA minus capex in Tauron's mining, coal mining, is 0 over the last 10 years. So this is the business you're pouring your money in. I'd like to understand why you're doing this, or what's the physical demand, what's happening to the physical demand, taking account the capacity market that possibly will cut some power plants from you, cut off some power plants. Our mining is, first of all, geared towards satisfying the needs of Tauron Capital Group. And in this context, in this direction, that's what we are running our investment project. One important thing is very important, because the implementation of BAT conclusions, because apart from the capacity market, also the BAT conclusions will come into effect. And this BAT conclusion mean higher requirements with respect to the coal quality. This is a very important element, because for instance, with respect to the chlorine level, our Sobieski coal mine has the type of coal that is exactly right for the units operating under the BAT conclusions regime. However, this coal is not as well widespread in Poland, so therefore the Sobieski coal mine coal is for us very valuable one for us. With respect to the quantity of the volume of demand for coal, that's true, but after the After completing the project and launching the 910 megawatt unit investment project, and at the same time shutdown of 120 megawatt units, the consumption of coal by Tauron Group will go down. But however, on the other hand, the quality requirements will be higher. Therefore, we are working now on the concept of marrying or merging these two elements. On one hand, different requirements coming from the generation segment quality-wise, and the capabilities of our mining segment. That's true. The question is not easy, but let me put it this way, that with respect to the cash generation by the mining segment, we are looking at this in a broader context, not just at the mining segment, also on what, thanks to the mining segment, we are earning in other segments, mainly in the generation segment. Thank you very much. Please, the next question. Good afternoon, Robert Mayer, IPOPEMA. My question would be about the cost calculation for the Jaworzno investment project costs. What amount would be the final amount? Because we had recently some controversies with respect to PGE on Opole. It turned out that there was an additional 1.5 billion more is allocated outside the contract for the commissioning and for the startup, all different types of investment projects. And overall, could you quantify that in case of Jaworzno? Well, I'd like to ask Director Niemiec to ask this question, answer this question if possible. As of today, as a matter of fact, the full budget that we already communicated to the market, 6.2 billion PLN, is correct. I mean, there's no reasons or circumstances that could lead to some changes. Is there some kind of shunting line for always, some carburization, the startup, the commissioning? In case of Opole, it costs 500 million PLN, for instance. Can you confirm, in case of all the costs related to the startup and commissioning of this unit are already included in the cost of this investment project? So practically, we are not foreseeing any further additional capex related to this project. Okay. If I may, coal price, with respect to coal price, because you're showing here for the general segment outlook more than 12% increase of coal price, and in the mining segment, 10% exactly is the price of. So the mining segment is selling below what you're buying at for the generation segment. That's correct. Can we understand it this way? Well, in the mining segment, we are dealing with an increase by about 10%. However, with respect to the large and medium-sized lump coal, and it's about 3% increase, whereas in the coal dust, thermal coal dust prices, segment prices, it's more than 12%. So it's very similar in the mining and the generation segments price increases. We must remember about one thing. What we are presenting here is the final increase after adjustments due to quality. So therefore, if the mining segment is selling certain volumes, this is coke practically, because let us remember that Brzeszcze has a bit of a different characteristic of the coal output than Janina and Sobieski coal mines. So in this case, the average sales price is a bit different. It's difficult to compare. However, in the very thermal coal dust that are being sent between mining and generation, the increase is more than 12%. Thank you very much. I can't see anyone else. Mr. Piotr Jones, still infallible, Mr. Piotr Dzięciołowski. Yes, sometimes I have more questions, sometimes, than I should, maybe. But I'd like to ask, because in the newspapers I saw somewhere that Mr. Morawiecki, Prime Minister, is supporting the merger of two energy groups, utility groups. What would be your view of a possible potential concept of you merging with now someone else with a different pieces of puzzles that could be arranged here? Would it be good for the shareholders? Not good? Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense? Or what's your opinion on that? Well, let me answer that. Well, we completed a lot of work trying to find a statement of Mr. Prime Minister on in this respect. As you just said, the paper wrote said the Prime Minister said something, but you didn't find the statement anywhere. But seriously speaking, as a matter of fact, there are no ideas or in this respect from the ownership side. From the ownership perspective, so the consolidation would have to have some goal. So the question is, what's the point? What's the goal? Looking historically, we can say today that the idea of merging PGE with Energa, for instance, historically didn't work out because of market concentration issues. So this could be a problem. Potentially, there could be a problem with respect to exceeding the concentration ratios being exceeded if TAURON were to become taken into account in this respect. But that's true that recently media are going crazy around various ideas consolidation-wise, and the ideas related to integrating the heating segment within one group, outside of our group. Well, from our side, we do not have such ideas. Okay, and now a question about cash flow of TAURON itself. Namely, in 2019, according to this previous slide, you will complete both the Jaworzno power plant as well as Stalowa Wola power plants. And what is the possibility of TAURON generating cash over the 2025 period, and what will happen to this money? Because I understand once you complete the largest capex, then finally, for the first time, we'll return to the dividend policy. That would be my suggestion, modest suggestion. So what would happen after 2019? What will be the new concept? We are continuing to say what we were saying when we were presenting the strategy in 2016, namely that, based on our analysis, it seems that the first year where we see the possibility of paying out dividend would be 2020 for year 2019, because the first year when we are expecting positive free cash flow would be 2020. We want to allocate this cash flow, first of all, obviously, to stabilize or to reduce the debt, because we are expecting that beyond 2020 it will be possible to reduce our debt. And, of course, obviously, the dividend policy is still in place. However, it is also common knowledge that the shareholders make the decision about the dividend. I'm just describing here the management board's approach. So here, 2019, still in terms of cash flow, will be a year that will be similar to the recent years. And can you say something, 2020, 2025 average annual cash flow out of this post maintenance capex? How much money it will be? What's the cash generating capability? How soon you can reduce your debt? Because assets will be new, distribution will be there, regulatory asset base very high, new generation, old generation shut down, so on. So I'm thinking ahead. So let me put it this way: the price is relatively low, 0.25 of the book value. We all know where the price is of the shares, and all of a sudden you will say we are making 300 million per annum. Free cash flow yield becomes attractive. So I'm trying to understand what, in your opinion, the situation is here. Is less than 500 million, more than 500 million per annum, because EBITDA and Jaworzno will contribute additional EBITDA to your earnings. It's very difficult for me to answer this question, because looking at our outlook, of course, each of you knows there's a lot of elements that have an impact on that. For us, a major, very important factor, of course, will be the capacity market revenue. We are hoping that this revenue will be high, saying we are counting on that. We'll see what will be the electricity price. I'm thinking that generally we may say that this additional cash flow will be significant from Tauron Capital Group's point of view. In the beginning, in 2020 or before the capital market coming to force, definitely it's clear it will be lower, but it will go up later. But I wouldn't like to give you a specific amount, because even within our internal analysis it keeps changing. And my last question, because you're owning 10% of PGE1, of this nuclear power plant. Not yet. We are not the owner yet. It seemed to me that there are three entities, KGHM and someone else. No, of course, I'm kidding. We are not the owner, because we are not the owner of 10% of 10%. I'd like to ask, because recently the minister said that by the end of March there will be some update of the nuclear project. Are you involved in those works? Are you taking into account, or trying to mix yourself out of this project? Well, ladies and gentlemen, worldwide there is no utility that would be able to finance on its own and maintain the operation of a nuclear power plant. Therefore, any place where such power plants are being built, it's very important to get the support from the state policy. That's exactly the situation in Poland. Therefore, we have the same situation as any utility worldwide. Therefore, we simply will adjust, will respond accordingly, taking into account the approach of the government, of the state, to this nuclear power plant project. So at this point, it's difficult for us to say anything. The recent press releases indicate that the decision may be taken by the end of March. At that point in time, we probably will be a bit wiser in this respect. Thank you very much. During our... Yes, please, Mr. Paweł Puchalski, if I can see you correctly. Yes, Paweł Puchalski, BZWBK. One question: you have to refurbish generation unit by 2021. What amounts are you foreseeing for adapting your generating units to BAT conclusions? How many generating units will be upgrading, refurbishing to get in line with the capacity market requirements? Let me ask Mr. Dyer to answer the question. Generally, the main generating units we are planning to refurbish, that's true. This all depends upon the final capacity market shape, but it's becoming more and more realistic, although the key documents are not available yet, and in the coming months those documents will be prepared. However, in terms of capex of Tauron generation, it could reach 600-700 million PLN, whereas Tauron heat, because here also some of our units that are supplying Bielsko-Tychy and the Silesian metropolitan area, the Katowice metropolitan area, it will be the amount that in total that should not be more than 900 million, up to 1 billion PLN in maximum. And the 200 megawatt type units. These are the units. Either the existing installation will have to be modernized. For instance, the Wodziska power plant has a catalytic equipment system on the second line of the boiler, and only certain layers have to be added there. However, at some other units, you need full new installations to be placed there. That's all from me. Thank you. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, during the broadcast of our conference, quite a lot of questions came from our web users, but the majority of those questions were related to the dividend issue, which was explained by Mr. Wadowski responding to the question of Mr. Piotr Dzięciołowski. So I think there's no point to come back to this issue. Our speakers will be at your service, available to you. Yes, there is another question. Yes, Mr. Paweł. Yes, one more question I'd like to ask, please. PGE has repeatedly mentioned when developing its heat segment that it's counting on new support mechanism for the heat market. Have you heard anything? about any special, specific dedicated to heat support. Anything such as capacity market, but not for the conventional capacity, but for the heat, something to replace red, yellow certificates or something like that. No, we are of the opinion, at least we cannot confirm that there is some idea that's being circulating or is a specific idea, concrete idea that could be discussed today. In our opinion, in terms of heat generating units, they are also allocated to the heat market. That need some specifics that you take into account when you submit those units for the heat market. So, just to get your more detailed, specific answer, you're not assuming any additional aid for the heat market. No, I think that the capacity market is exactly the instrument that will also include some support for those units as well. That's a rather conservative assumption. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned before, our speakers will still be available for some time. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to the conference today. We'd like to invite you to the meeting after we publish the earnings report for Q1. And in our daily operations, our investor relations team is available at your service. Please contact us. Thank you very much. See you next time.